Let's begin with NVIDIA and Intel. NVIDIA announcing it'll invest $5 billion in Intel as part of a deal to co-develop data center and PC products. In a release this morning, NVIDIA's Jensen Huang said, quote, this historic collaboration tightly couples NVIDIA's AI and accelerated computing stack with Intel's CPUs and the vast x86 ecosystem, a fusion of two world-class platforms. Together, we will expand our ecosystems and lay the foundation for the next era of computing. Doesn't include a deal, Jim, for Intel to make NVIDIA's high-end chips, but this will be one of the best days, price action-wise, Intel's ever had.
I've always felt that when Lip-Bhutan won the Semiconductor Man of the Year award, that Robert Noyce in 2022, and one of the introducers was Jensen Huang, that there would be some sort of partnership here. I did not know it would be this fabulous. The reason why this is so great is, if you can imagine, NVIDIA gets PCs, NVIDIA gets consumer. They don't have consumer. Intel is already in with a CPU, and now NVIDIA will be using their CPU. It's easy to see how AMD could be dislodged. It's easy to see how ARM can be dislodged. Remember, the CEO of ARM used to be at NVIDIA. David, this is a remarkable thing for both. It takes off Intel any possibility that it's going to be an existential crisis. This needed to be seen. It needed a lot of money. It had the government. It had SoftBank. Now it has NVIDIA. I'm not worried at all about Intel, national treasure, but man, NVIDIA did fantastic.
Yeah, well, I think you said a couple of the more important things there. National champion, which does seem to be what is being created here.
Very much so.
Intel is still a tiny company, market cap-wise, in terms of compared to NVIDIA, and $5 billion for NVIDIA is nothing. I mean, let's admit that. Of course, they could find that in the couch cushions wherever, in the corporate offices. But that said, the $2 billion that came in from SoftBank, which kind of started the software at $23 a share, by the way. This $5 billion is also right there, right? 23, 28 a share is where NVIDIA is buying this stake. And then, of course, the money from the government, which was forthcoming regardless, but then came in the form of an equity investment, essentially. But they've raised, what, $20 billion almost?
Yes, and I think that when you looked at their balance sheet, the biggest worry, when I spoke to Lip-Bhutan, I was very concerned. This balance sheet is trouble. What I didn't realize was just how loved this man is. He is revered in the semiconductor world. By the way, and when everyone was investing in enterprise software, he chose to invest in semis. Turned around Cadence, 50-bagger. And Carl, I think what this does is cement NVIDIA as being the company that has basically a soup to nuts offering. You go all the way from the PC to the highest end. There had always been an issue about whether NVIDIA was ever going to get into the PC market. It's fantastic. So we were all talking about NVIDIA in China yesterday. Now we should be talking about NVIDIA as being the colossus. They did try to buy ARM at one time. This is better.
This is better than
it's better. They don't need to buy ARM. There's a lot of stuff in ARM. Well, look, I like PCs.
NVIDIA didn't need to do anything. It's the most valuable company the world's ever seen.
Look, I mean, ARM is great in cell phones. It's just absolutely great. And that's why I think you couldn't have, because of the antitrust. But I just have always felt that NVIDIA should play a role in the PC. And we have it.
Meantime, you mentioned ARM, which was down about 4% pre-market. There is a view, I'm reading the Wolf Note today, AMD does have its own CPU, GPU pairing. Will be interesting to see if NVIDIA and AMD announce something similar to today's news.
That would be really incredible because they are rivals. But I think people have to understand, when I say rivals in this group, there really isn't a lot of bad will. This group kind of is against China. It's not against each other. And I know that yesterday I was trying to figure out exactly who gets kept out. Whether AMD benefits from what happened yesterday in China, it's not clear. I thought it would. It's not clear. But I will say that these companies are they're frenemies in the sense that it would shock me if AMD did a deal with them because AMD's got the GPU.
That seems hard to imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, ARM they were best friends. I'd like to think whether ARM can still be a partner is not clear.
But I mean, Carl made the point. Of course, this is not a foundry deal. Right, I'm just taking a look at Intel stock price.
But look at the foundries, look at the semiconductor capital equipment stocks, because I think people now feel that there's no doubt that Intel's going to be able to pay.
ASML was up almost 8.
Wow, and Lam Research too. I think there was always a worry that maybe that they would have to not get paid because Intel was so in the hole.
Right.
That's big.
And that's right. That's not going
That's
to be
big.
the case. But I mean, do they need to bring in more investment, even with the government obviously putting in money largely to enhance their ability to manufacture here in the U.S.
No,
into the foundry? Do we know what the strategy is going to be there?
Well, we know that the foundry business, we don't look. Foundry's fungible. I think people don't think it is fungible. I think that it's dedicated to AI or nothing. Obviously, NVIDIA does not need Intel's AI. I don't know how much of what Intel has done can be switched, but I would say that, yes, this is now enough. I mean, the balance sheet was in tatters. It's no longer in tatters.
No,
they have a lot of capital.
Tatters. And to credit you as well, you've been very positive on Lip-Bu from the beginning.
I just think he's just such a great man.
And the stock is obviously,
right.
Thank you for saying that. Is rewarding that.
Well, he's a person who was loved in this and revered.
Now, we've talked a lot about what this means for Intel, but what does it enhance for NVIDIA in terms of, and again, you can read these press releases and get a bit confused about what exactly is going on, but integrating the strengths of their AI and accelerated computing with Intel CPU technologies and x86 ecosystem to deliver cutting-edge solutions for customers. What does that actually mean? What does it mean for NVIDIA in terms of this deal? Does it actually do anything for them?
Oh, yes. NVIDIA needed the PC. Now, we all seem to think that server PC, we all seem to think that that's also low end. They only need AI. No, I mean, they want to have everything.
Right.
They wanted to have cell phone. Now, I'm not saying that Jensen was just desperate for PC, but it just fell into his lap. It fell into his lap. And I always knew that he and Lip-Bu were so close that something could be done. I didn't think it would be so good as that they could be, that from now on the CPU, which is a huge amount of CPUs in a data center. Huge.
Right. So, I mean, this is both PCs, but also custom data center products that will be put together, essentially.
Put together.
Be delivered to the
custom would be more Broadcom. But I do think that we tend to think that the PC market and the server market is really small and AI is all that matters. That's not true. Everything matters.
Intel shares surging this morning as NVIDIA announces this $5 billion investment in the chip maker. The collaboration includes plans to develop data center and PC chips. Patrick Moorhead, More Insights and Strategy CEO and Chief Analyst, joins us this morning to talk about the deal. Patrick, and where you think it originated from? Is this sort of being pushed along by sort of government forces, or do you think they're looking at a pure business case here?
Yeah, so it's really clear for me. It's all upside for Intel, all goodness. I think these discussions have been going on for a long time. What's unclear to me is the stimulus that got this closed. New Intel CEO Lip-Bu Tan has been in there for about 6 months. He's definitely a deal maker, and I think this has his prints all over it. I have always been looking for the hand on the scale from the administration. I don't know if that is the case here or not. It wouldn't surprise me if we find out that this is, in fact, particularly when you look at the $5 billion investment from Intel, that was an ask from the administration.
Is it truly bad news for ARM and AMD?
I don't think so. First of all, we probably won't see the fruits of the labors for 2.5 or 3 years. And the other thing is that sources have told me this is optionality for ARM. Like, there will be ARM versions and there will be Intel versions, and people can pick from there. I think on the AMD story, it's really about where is AMD's growth. Right now in data center GPUs, you've got NVIDIA at 95% and AMD at 5%. The real story about AMD is what it can do in those markets as opposed to the other markets. The other thing that I want to make clear is what I'm hearing through my channel checks is on Blackwell systems. AMD is currently the CPU of choice or the head node, which, again, I don't want that to be confused with Grace Blackwell, which is the ARM plus the GPU, but it's really too hard to tell at this point the real impact to AMD and ARM.
So what does NVIDIA get out of it?
I think what NVIDIA gets is optionality, meaning they now have an Intel version of this. And I also think what it does is it solidifies their lead in the high end of the PC market related to workstation and gaming. AMD had been making a lot of market share gains inside of the PC market as of late. And I think what it does is it puts a very high-end option out there for gamers and folks who buy workstations to give them a little extra choice. And I also think that Jensen can tell the administration that, hey, he gave $5 billion to a government-owned, partially owned entity, and I think that's a big win.
Yeah, well, speaking of, right, so they've taken in money from the government and from SoftBank and now from NVIDIA. Is it enough for Intel to weather whatever storm may be coming their way?
So Intel does need more money to build out, let's say, 14A in the way that I know that they want to do it. So it doesn't get them completely out of that, but it's a step in the right direction, right? They need likely another $5 to $10 billion to build that out. But I don't think there's a short, there's a pretty long line of people who give money to Intel to build this out, particularly out of sovereign wealth funds. The question becomes control, ownership, and voting rights.
Finally, Patrick, best day for semis here since June. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with exactly what we're talking about. Yesterday's story, though, was more about China demand and access to the Chinese market for NVIDIA. Jensen seemed to suggest that he's kind of gotten the street to understand not to take those numbers into models.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and you can't get more conservative than that. Just zero out China, and then everybody can adjust their models. And then if there's any China upside or breakthrough, it's obvious that the company is frustrated. And how can you blame them, right? You get this up and down, you get the red light, you get the green light, and now, right? What can you tell investors, right? Zeroing it out is the right thing to do. And I think until those new China chips get on a pallet and they get shipped and they're received in China, the company probably won't say a thing.
Right. Let's get right to that stock news of the day, which is the NVIDIA Intel deal to co-develop chips for data centers and PCs. Joining us now is Bernstein Senior U.S. Semis Analyst Stacy Rasgon and our own Christina Partsenevelis, who covers the chip sector. Christina, this is interesting from your point of view because we have now seen a few deals for investments in Intel. Does NVIDIA surprise you?
No. And I say that because politics does play a role in this, but the timing is amazing. In the press release, they don't mention anything to do with the White House. Keep in mind that the Trump administration invested roughly $10 billion just a month ago, 433 million shares, $20 in 2047. So right now, that's a 51% increase in their investment. Not too bad. An opportunity for President Trump to really say, like, great deal on them. But it wasn't mentioned in the press release. Some sources are telling Dow Jones that this was in the works for quite some time. The fact that NVIDIA is giving a shot in the arm to Intel does speak volumes to perhaps the packaging capabilities, but there's no mention of the foundry business in there. There's no mention of the timeline as to when they'll be building said PC chips, said data center products. So I think that's something that maybe we'll get from the 1 p.m. Eastern press release, but I do wonder what this means going forward for the collaboration.
Intel's up 26%, Stacy. NVIDIA's up nicely as well. It's up a few percentage, 3 percentage points, which is big for a, $4.2 trillion stock. Do you see it as a win-win, as the market is?
I mean, yeah, look, so it's clearly positive for Intel. Again, they can use the money, and as they did write in my note, Jensen's the kingmaker, right? So having his blessing probably is pretty close to priceless, so it certainly doesn't hurt, right? And then, I mean, some of the other stocks that are probably down, you got AMD and ARM, and it kind of makes sense to the extent that you figure that this is not a foundry deal, it's a product deal, at least at this point. And, if Intel's products become more competitive and they're designed into more sockets and they take more share, I mean, those are the kind of areas that they would start to eat into. So, yeah. So I get the moves to now, is 25% like not enough or too much? I mean, that's a whole other conversation we could have. But I'm not surprised the stock's up nicely today. Yeah.
What, do you think it's not enough or too much?
I'm not going to go into that here. I'm not surprised it's up. I'm not surprised it's up nicely today.
I would imply maybe he's saying this possibly too much, given the lack of details in terms of what they're going to be building, time frame, all of that. But I'm not speaking for you at all.
To be fair, there's not a lot of details. You asked Christine if she was surprised, right?
Yeah.
I'm not surprised there's a deal. I think that the two things that were maybe a little surprising, one is the magnitude. So $5 billion, for NVIDIA, it's not a lot of money, but for Intel, it clearly is. And then number two, I do think people for Intel have really been looking for foundry deals. And this is not that. And it kind of makes sense to me, because it's hard for Intel to sell a foundry deal where they don't really have any sort of foundry track record, and it's still unclear what that roadmap means. But I mean, let's be honest, their product company, their product business needs help as well. They've been bleeding share, and so to the extent I think that's good. But the product deal, I think, was not really on people's radar screens.
Right. I'm thinking back to what you wrote, Stacy, after the government deal. Intel was originally supposed to get these funds for free. Giving up equity seems worse. The sad thing is, all the money by itself probably won't be enough to help. Does this change that view?
Not really. Again, Intel actually has had enough money to operate, right? They didn't really have enough money to build out the capacity plans if they were going to build the foundry. And so again, the kind of stuff that they got, they got $9 billion from the government, $2 billion from SoftBank, $5 billion. So that's $16 billion almost, like, total. Even that by itself is not enough, for example, to build out Ohio. Like, Ohio was expected $28 billion, and that was several years ago. It's probably more than that. But every bit helps. Like, if their plan really is to go into foundry, they are clearly going to need more money, and this doesn't get them there. But we're starting to go along the path. I wonder what they will have to give up in the future to get the rest of it that they need to go down there, if indeed that is the path that they're going down. I don't know yet. But
Christina,
the money doesn't hurt either. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt.
You guys both keep bringing up the foundry point. So what is the significance of that?
Because it's not mentioned in there. And the whole point of President Trump, investing $10 billion is to bring jobs back in America, right? So you want this foundry business to succeed. Whereas in the past, some board members wanted to split off the foundry business because it's so unprofitable. So this is not a case in point where NVIDIA is investing, but they're not saying they're investing directly into the foundry business, which still raises questions about keeping that part of the business. The other point that Stacy talked about is $5 billion isn't that much for NVIDIA. NVIDIA's projected free cash flow in the next 5 years is roughly $500 billion. So that's like 1%. It's almost I don't want to say it, but it's like a rounding error, right? When you're talking big numbers like this. So I think that for NVIDIA, you can't discount the fact that politics are at play. Why? You have the relations with China. NVIDIA is always used as a bargaining chip. NVIDIA is investing in Intel. The White House is invested in Intel. The White House wants investments here on American soil. Here's a way to, be on the good side. The same thing with GTC that's coming up in D.C. at the end of October. Why do it in D.C.? I'm not saying
we know why.
I don't know why.
Okay. Stacy, Christina, we'll leave it there with both stocks on the move.
Gene, does this tie-up make you any more bullish on NVIDIA? Does it move the needle?
I think it does. I think the needle moving for NVIDIA still comes down to the bread and butter. It's the 8 biggest companies. They account for just over 60% of revenue. And if you want to follow where things are going to go here, or move forward to the late October, when we're getting the September guidance, there's 3 things to watch. It is the guidance from the CapEx guidance from Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. Last quarter, they suggested that their 2026 CapEx would be up on average 7%. Meta said it would be up 47%. And so when I think about NVIDIA and what does it mean and all this, the announcement today means little, given the majority of their business is still with these hyperscalers. And if investors want to get a sense about what's going to happen with NVIDIA, just look at those guidance. If they raise it to 20%, NVIDIA is going to be beating numbers. This is going to go on for longer than what investors are currently factoring in.
And if that's the case, Gene, I mean, you obviously have had some positive news flow around NVIDIA. The stock itself, after getting repriced following earnings, has been kind of flattish. It feels like investors want to grab for, the next unexploited name that maybe has a little more leverage to incremental revenues there. So is that just a phase we're going through, or is that something where it feels like NVIDIA is so large already that it's tough to actually excite investors?
I think the excitement's going to come back, and I understand the second derivative, if growth slows, what that means for the multiple. But ultimately, the street is looking for, call it 30% growth for NVIDIA next year. Maybe the whisper is slightly above that. But I think they can grow closer to 40%. And there's clearly a lot of places where you can create wealth on the whole supply chain and AI. But I still think NVIDIA is going to be an iron horse.
The indices certainly weren't created for the stock of NVIDIA, though. A company with a $4 trillion market cap that's not at all hostage to interest rates. In fact, it's not even hostage to its own industry, as we saw today, which is why NVIDIA could make a $5 billion investment in a one-time semiconductor kingpin today, Intel, and see its own stock rally 3.5% or $150 billion in response. You spend $5 billion and you tackle on $150 billion in market cap. Now that's a miracle. This is the kind of gain everybody wants, and it's much easier to get when you don't spend all of your time worrying about the Fed and quarter points and dot plots or putting the hate on the individual stocks, as almost every professional does, because they think that you can't handle. First, let me tell you these incredibly wild circumstances that explain why Intel even needed the cash so that NVIDIA could make the profit. At one time, Intel was by far the most important semiconductor company in the world. It owned the PC and server market, but it didn't go into fast chips, the kind that NVIDIA makes, the kind that originally for gaming, but ultimately generate artificial intelligence. Not only that, for years, Intel ran circles around advanced micro devices. But when Lisa Su took over at AMD and set her sights on taking Intel's business, she succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. Intel had roughly 85% of the PC market when Su took over 11 years ago. AMD had about 15. Now AMD holds about 40%. And in the huge server market, AMD had only 1 to 2%. Now it has more than 25%. In both cases, AMD is still gaining share, while Intel feels lost at sea, dazed and confused. A few years ago, Intel picked a new CEO, Pat Gelsinger, who vowed to stop losing share in PCs and servers while taking on NVIDIA in accelerated computing and artificial intelligence. Oh, man, he spent fortunes, far more than Intel could afford. Although he caught a break when the federal government gave Intel some big handouts from President Biden's CHIPS Act. But it wasn't enough. No, the huge foundry build-out failed to attract enough customers. Gelsinger was ultimately fired. In came Lip-Bu Tan, possibly the greatest semiconductor venture capitalist in history. He left Intel's board of directors under the Gelsinger regime because he wasn't a fan. Once he came in, he had to end the runaway manufacturing train and raise cash in a hurry. And he's proved quite adept at that. First, he got $2 billion from SoftBank, $23 a share. Then he got $8.9 billion from the Trump administration, 433 million shares struck at $20.47. Then last night, he got that $5 billion from NVIDIA at $23.28 per share. It was instant gold for NVIDIA as Intel stock immediately zoomed from just under $25 to $30.57 tonight. That's right, $30.57. Now, that was a remarkable move. In return for the money, Intel got a new partner in this PC and server business where more than $50 billion is up for grabs, and NVIDIA really wasn't playing in that sector at all. That makes it a huge win for NVIDIA and Jensen Huang because they got Intel for less than it's worth, and they'll never turn out more personal computer. They need the personal computer exposure, let's put it that way. Meanwhile, Intel says stays in business and can thrive if it executes. And I think it can under Lip-Bu Tan. AMD, okay, new competitor, but Lisa Su's used to it. That's why her stock was initially down a lot, but bounced back. You can never count out Su. She's too good. More important, for our purposes, NVIDIA, which had seen its stock in the doldrums of late because of its China problems, broke out of that sphere of influence for the moment. I think today's news, where NVIDIA can spend a couple of hours worth of profits to make a hugely successful investment, is a terrific reminder there's a lot more to NVIDIA than China. And there's still a lot of money to be made in individual stocks, including the biggest one in the world, NVIDIA. Sure, the broader market may be hostage to the Fed, but you can't game the Fed. Even the president can't game the Fed, and he's sure trying. But can you game NVIDIA? Okay, here's what you can do. Stop the gaming. You can invest in Jensen Huang and his amazing team. Invest. You can let NVIDIA, a veritable index of chip companies, make you the kind of money index funds can't ever keep up with. You can own NVIDIA and not have to trade it.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. Today, NVIDIA announced a $5 billion investment into Intel and a new partnership to jointly develop multiple generations of custom data center and PC products. My initial thought when I saw this announcement was that the president probably pushed Jensen for the investment, given that the Financial Times reported yesterday that Jensen would be speaking with the president yesterday evening. But today, during a press conference, Jensen said that the administration is not involved in this partnership. And so it appears that this partnership is something that has been in the works for some time now. Really quick, I'm going to rapid fire some important points from the press conference today. Jensen said today that NVIDIA is becoming a major customer of Intel server CPUs. He said NVIDIA is still evaluating Intel's foundry business. Jensen clarified that this partnership with Intel is focused on new custom chips. Jensen said that this partnership with Intel addresses a $25 to $50 billion market. And Jensen said that the ARM roadmap will continue. And so when it comes to CPUs in the data center, it appears that NVIDIA is working with Intel to provide greater optionality to clients. Intel is not meant to replace ARM, but rather to offer an additional option to NVIDIA's customers. Overall, I think this partnership is good for both companies. It is obviously very good for Intel, but I do think NVIDIA stands to benefit from it as well. Jensen said during the press conference that he believes the return on the Intel investment will be fantastic. As I mentioned, the Financial Times reported yesterday that Jensen would be speaking with the president yesterday evening. I hope we will get an update at some point regarding the U.S. allowing a new Blackwell chip into China. Yesterday's news of China banning NVIDIA's AI chips seems to apply specifically to the RTX Pro 6000D chip. As far as I'm aware, this ban does not apply to the H20 or to a potential new Blackwell chip. The FT said that Chinese officials think domestic Chinese chips are just as good as NVIDIA's H20. I know that topic is up for debate, but that's what they're saying. I do wonder if China is trying to get the US to allow a better chip than the H20 to be sold in China. I also wonder if China is trying to give themselves more leverage ahead of negotiations with the US. It's being reported today that the president is scheduled to speak with Xi tomorrow by phone, and so the timing of China's ban is interesting. In the end, I think that if NVIDIA is allowed to sell a new Blackwell chip in China that is substantially better than the H20, I think China would eventually allow it into the country. Sure, they might push back against a new chip initially in order to flex their muscles, so to speak. But if NVIDIA is allowed to sell a chip into China that is substantially better than the domestic alternatives and substantially better than the H20, I think China would allow that new chip into the country at least until China has a comparable alternative. Ultimately, I think this situation is part of the back and forth trade dispute between the US and China, and I think it will eventually be worked out. Regardless of that, NVIDIA's business is accelerating even without any H20 sales to China. Therefore, any China revenue is additional upside to what is already a solid long-term setup. And at the same time, a lack of China revenue does not ruin the long-term setup. In other news today, NVIDIA announced investing £2 billion, so about $2.7 billion in UK AI startups to help catalyze the UK's AI startup ecosystem. This announcement is in addition to the many announcements of US tech companies investing in the UK from earlier this week. Let me quickly recap some of those announcements in case you missed it. NVIDIA announced in a press release that they are partnering with Nscale to scale up 300,000 NVIDIA Grace Blackwell GPUs worldwide with up to 60,000 GPUs in the UK. NVIDIA, along with partners, including Nscale and CoreWeave, will invest up to $15 billion in UKI factories with up to 120,000 NVIDIA Blackwell GPUs to power initiatives such as OpenAI's Stargate UK. NVIDIA also announced teaming up with Oxford Quantum Circuits to build a quantum GPU AI supercomputing center. NVIDIA and Tech UK are also launching an R&D hub to accelerate the nation's AI and robotics ecosystem. In that same press release, NVIDIA said Stargate UK will feature Blackwell Ultra GPUs operating in Nscale's UK data centers by 2026. Nscale and Microsoft also announced plans to build the UK's most powerful supercomputer with more than 24,000 NVIDIA Grace Blackwell Ultra GPUs. CoreWeave also announced that they will establish an advanced data center in Scotland with Grace Blackwell Ultra GPUs. And we were also told that many AI robotics companies in the United Kingdom are utilizing NVIDIA's products and software as they work to advance physical AI. All of that to say that this is a very large, multi-pronged AI investment in the UK, and it is very good news for NVIDIA as their products are involved throughout this massive AI initiative involving all of these tech companies. I continue to be bullish on NVIDIA long-term, and I think that most analysts are still underestimating NVIDIA's long-term growth, both in data center as well as in other large growth opportunities that NVIDIA is really just starting to capitalize on, such as sovereign, enterprise, AI-native startups, physical AI, and quantum computing. Looking ahead, we have NVIDIA GTC in Washington, D.C. this October, with a keynote from Jensen Huang scheduled for October 28th. Jensen told us on NVIDIA's recent earnings call that he is anxious to share more details about Rubin with us at GTC. I also hope we'll get an update on NVIDIA's progress in quantum computing. And I also want to remind you that whenever Jensen delivers a GTC keynote, he usually announces large-scale projects that are specific to the region where the GTC event is held. And considering that this GTC event is happening in Washington, D.C., I wonder if we will get any announcements of sovereign sovereign AI deals with the U.S. government or announcements of new large-scale projects with U.S. companies. With those possibilities in mind, this will be an important event to watch. Right now, we are seeing a convergence of multiple positive factors: great progress on sovereign AI deals, a swift production ramp of Blackwell Ultra, and growing AI demand thanks, in part to increasing use of agentic AI. These three factors are why I really like the setup for NVIDIA through the remainder of this year and into 2026. Certain sovereign AI deals should start to show up either in revenue or revenue guidance on NVIDIA's Q3 or Q4 reports. Blackwell Ultra's swift production ramp is leading to revenue growth acceleration, and I think the oncoming surge of compute demand fueled by agentic AI will extend well into 2026. Jensen appears to agree with this thesis, as he said on NVIDIA's earnings call that he expects reasoning agentic AI to be a major growth driver in 2026. Production is going well with Blackwell Ultra, as I mentioned. Rubin is on track to launch in 2026. Then we're expecting Rubin CPX at the end of 2026. Then we're expecting Rubin Ultra in 2027, and then Feynman after that in 2028. We have a clear data center product roadmap extending into 2028. And Jensen believes there will be growing AI demand and an expanding total addressable market during this time, as he is expecting $3 to $4 trillion of global AI factory buildout between now and 2030. I do not think that we are anywhere near any bubble bursting type of event. NVIDIA continues executing extremely well, and they have the earnings growth and future growth prospects to more than justify the company's current valuation. I seriously think that NVIDIA still has a lot of runway ahead of it, and I honestly think this company will be worth substantially more in future years than it is today. At least that's my view of the situation. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective, and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.